Greetings and welcome to From the Basement. In this video segment, we're going to take a look at finally getting the dragon breathing some fireballs. Yes, excitement is in the air. But before we can breathe fireballs, we actually need some fireball resources, so let's take care of that first. I'm going to go ahead and create a new sprite, so right-click, Create Sprite, Load Sprite, grab my fireball, and again, I've got that background, so I need to remove that background. Open, verify that I have my background there. My background is transparent, and I'm good. Click OK, and I've got that loaded in. Oops, and I forgot to name it. We'll call this SPR Fireball. Now let's define the fireball object. So I'm going to right-click, Create Object. I'll call this Fireball. Set the sprite. Okay, so what kind of actions are we going to need? Well, it would make sense for the fireball to start moving as soon as it's created. So we will add event create. And then we will put in a move fixed. Now, since the dragon is the only creature firing this fireball, and we always want to move it straight across the screen, we can just simply turn on the right direction arrow and set a speed of 32. Fireballs move fast. Now, we want to take one quick moment here to explain why are we putting in the values we're putting in. And the answer to that is, well, because the authors of the book already did the hard part of playing this game over and over and over again to figure out what good values are. Now, the more you use a particular game engine, the better feel you'll get for what good value ranges are. But for the most part, to get really good values, iteration is key. You just play it over and over and tweak and tweak and tweak until you finally find that sweet spot. So, thankfully, the book did the hard work for us on that part. All right, so that'll create the fireball. It'll send it careening across the screen. Now, remember our mantra, computers are dumb. They do what you tell them to do. We haven't told this fireball what to do once it leaves the room. Let's say it misses the demons, misses the boss guy, misses the hatchlings, thankfully, and goes off the other end of the screen. What do we do? Well, we need to destroy it. Otherwise, as the player continues to play the game, these fireballs won't get destroyed. They'll still be in memory. And so if the player plays the game long enough and you get several 100,000 fireballs, off in the void, you'll eventually run out of memory and crash. That's not a good thing. Although in all likelihood, your frame rate would slow down to an unacceptable level before that happened. So let's put in some logic for handling this. We'll go to our friend Other. Anytime you have an event that just doesn't seem to match any of these, take a peek at Other. There's quite a few useful events in there. And this time we want Outside Room. Now, Intersect Boundary, which we've used before, gets triggered the instant just the tiniest bit of an object is outside of the room. That's not what we want. If we used that, the fireballs would seem to magically disappear once they hit the edge. Outside Room, instead, will not trigger until all of the object has left the room. That is what we want. We want to make it look like the fireball has just simply gone off the edge of the room, and when it's off screen, that's when we destroy it. Now, for destruction, we're going to actually have to move off of Move and go to the Main 1 tab. And in the Main 1 tab, we'll have this little recycle can icon. You can drag over. And this is the destroy instance, and we'll tell it to destroy self, meaning the object that this event is firing on. And that's all we need for the fireball logic, according to the book. Now, I'll come back and talk about why I think we need more logic on the fireballs a little bit later, but this part will stick with the book because it doesn't really change the function of the game. It's a stylistic question more than anything else. So that gets us our fireball. Now let's get the fireball being generated. And we'll do it the book way first, and then we'll do it my way. So we're going to add an event, and we're going to add a key press event because we want the user to have, well, the book wants the user to have to press the space bar for every fireball. So we will do a key press, and the space bar is what we're going to be abusing. Now, here's where we get into instancing of objects. You can view these objects over here as sort of templates. They don't really exist while they're over here. They're just blueprints. Once you actually place them in a room, however, that's when the blueprint gets used to create an instance of the object. Every instance of an object is created from the same blueprint and therefore will behave exactly the same way. A really striking example of this, so if I come into my room and toss in a couple of extra dragons here and hit the play button, all of these dragons are going to behave exactly the same way. If I press the up arrow, they all go up. Down arrow, they all go down. They move in perfect sync. Well, after I squish them all up on the top of the screen. But they behave exactly the same because they are all made from the same blueprint, the dragon object. We'll be using that in a later game, the koala game. For now, however, I'm going to get rid of those extra dragons. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a command here to create an instance of the fireball using this blueprint. Since all fireballs will be using this blueprint, all fireballs will have the exact same behavior. So the create instance is on main 1, and it looks like this little light bulb. Don't ask me why it's a light bulb. I don't know. Drag over the light bulb, and we tell it, what do we want to create? Well, I want to create a fireball. And when we click in here, it's going to give us a list of all of our game objects that we have available. Now it's asking me, where do I want to create this? Well, I want to create this wherever the dragon happens to be. So I'm going to check relative. Since I am in the dragon object, anytime I do a relative XY location, I am saying this is relative to where the dragon is right this very moment. Now I'm going to leave that as 0, 0, even though it's not supposed to be that way, to show, again, origins and why they're important. I'm also going to real quick go back into my fireball, and you do not have to do this, and I'm going to alter my fireball speed down to 1 so I can actually show something here. So I'm going to hit the play button, and I'm going to generate my fireball, and notice my fireballs are generating back behind the dragon's head. Remember, 0, 0 is in the upper left-hand corner of both the screen, and by default, the origin is in the upper left-hand corner of images. So the upper left-hand corner of the fireball is being placed at the upper left-hand corner of the dragon, which is, probably right about there where my mouse cursor is. Maybe right there. That's not what we want. What we want is have it look like the fireball is coming out of the dragon's mouth. Now, normally this would require a little bit of experimentation to try to figure out where this is. Again, the book has done the hard work for us and has told us that we need to have this offset by 110. And now if we run it, now if we run it, and apparently my F5 has decided to stop responding on me, so we'll just click on the button. That looks much better. Now it looks like the fireballs are actually coming out of the dragon. Now there is a little bit of overlap, but honestly, once we increase the speed to 32 like it's supposed to be, we're not going to really notice. So I'm going to come back over here to my fireball, alter the speed back up to 32. Okay, don't need the fireball open anymore. And as fast as I can push the space bar, fireballs go spewing out at really quite fast speed across the screen. Maybe a little bit too fast in my opinion, but that's the speed the book has it at. Alright, now I don't like that control scheme. A couple of reasons. One, it's really reliant on how fast can the person tap the spacebar. And if you know how to do it, like me, you can get a really fast cadence going. It's also really bad for the keyboard. It's really annoying to anybody else who happens to be in the room. Hopefully the mic picked that up. Now to hear that tapping sound constantly, I was exaggerating a little bit, of course. Yeah, I don't like it. What would be better is if instead of having to press the space bar every time, we could just simply press the space bar and hold it down and have the fireballs just generate that way. Again, I know why the book is doing it this way. This way is easy. We added an event, we added a create action, and we're done. Having to hold down the space bar, I'm going to have to throw quite a few new things at you guys, so this is not in the chapter, so pay attention. Alright, now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this from a press space to a keyboard event. It's easy to change events. You just right-click on the event, change event, and I'm going to change this to a keyboard space. Remember, keyboards are continuous. Now, this isn't going to work so hot. So if I play this, and I hold down the space key, oh yeah, flamethrower, baby. While that might be very cool, that's not really the effect that we want, because I mean, that's just total overkill right there. Looks cool, but total overkill. So we need to fix that. Instead, what we want to have happen is we want to have the fireballs shoot 3 times per second. Or, to think of this in terms of steps, if we have 30 steps per second, and we want to be able to shoot 3 times per second, that means we only want to be able to shoot once every 10 steps. So there's a lot of sort of build-up to this. The first thing we need to do is we need to figure out whether or not we can shoot. And to do this, we're going to use a variable to keep track of it. Now, I haven't formally defined this yet. What is a variable? You can think of as a variable simply as a container for information. This information can be a number, can be a string, can be a sprite, can be an object. It just really depends. In this particular case, we're going to use a number to keep track of whether or not we can shoot. Mainly because all the drag and drop comparison operators pretty much just work on numbers. So we got to stick with that. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is now we're going to actually need a create event on the dragon. I'm going to add event create. And the reason why I need a create event on the dragon is I need to be able to initialize the variable that I'm going to use to keep track of whether or not I can shoot. So I'm going to go into control. Control is where basically you deal almost everything with variables. I'm going to use the set variable. And I'm going to set the variable to can shoot with a value of 1. Now there's a little bit of programmer history behind this. Historically in C++ and a great many of other languages, 0 means false, any non-zero value means true. So by saying can shoot is equal to 1, I'm saying can shoot is equal to true. In other words, yes, I can shoot. Now, variable names, important. You cannot have spaces in variable names. I cannot say can space shoot. Illegal variable name, that's not going to work. I cannot use special symbols. It would attempt to interpret this as can equals shoot, as in assign the value of shoot to can, which obviously that's not going to work out all that great. Also, you can use numbers in your variable name, but you cannot use a number as the first character. The first character must be a letter. Also, variable names are case sensitive. So can shoot with a capital S is a different variable name from can shoot with a lowercase s. You need to be very careful with your variables. Now, the reason why I capitalized the S, there's no real big mystical secret to that. It's called camel casing, where the first word for variables is all lowercase, and then the first letter of each word after that is uppercase. So, like, if I wanted to say can shoot now, I would capitalize the N because that's the first letter in the next word. Like I said, there's no big magical secret to that. It's just how I name my variables. So I'm going to set that to 1. And now I'm going to go into space here, and I'm going to do a test. Again, remember, we ask questions, so I'm going to ask a question on the variable. Is variable can shoot equal to 1? Now, this time, compared to the question that we asked on the movement, this is going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to have a couple of steps here. Not only do we need to be able to shoot our fireball, but we need to be able to set can shoot to 0. And there's one other step. We need to set an alarm. And I'll talk more about alarms in just a moment. But let's go ahead and set that now. So we're going to go to main 2. There's a little clock-like looking thing. We're going to drag that down, and we're going to set number of steps to 10 and alarm 0. You have got 12 alarms that you can set on an object. If you need more than that on a single object, you're doing it wrong. Think of a different way of doing it. So now the problem with all of this is that a question is only associated with the action that immediately follows it. So only create instance of an object fireball is associated with this question. That's not what I want. I want all 3 of these actions to be associated with the question. To do that, I'm going to need brackets, which are these little green triangles here. Drag a bracket here, a start bracket, drag an end bracket here. Notice how I've got a slight indent right here. And if I put in another action, I'm just going to put in a junk action here. Notice how this action is indented back over. This gives me a visual clue that these actions, these 3 actions, lines 3, 4, 5, are all associated with this question here. And that this line, action number 7, is not associated with anything. And I don't want you, so go away. Oop. Got a little twitch on the delete key there. So this is what I want my fireballs to look like. And before we deal with the alarms, let's just test real quick to make sure that this is actually going to work. So we'll rev this up. And what should happen is I should be able to fire 1 fireball, and then nothing else will happen. Yay! Now, make sure that's what your game is doing before you move on from this point. Because if you've messed up the logic for blocking the fireballs coming out, it's obviously not going to work when we go to fix the current problem and actually get fireballs fully working again. So make sure that is the behavior that your game has. You run it, you press the space bar once, and you get 1 fireball. Like so. Now, what are some potential errors you could run into? Well, one is you might not get any fireball. In which case, double check your question, can shoot 1 equal 2. Also, double check on your create that you are setting variable can shoot equal to 1. Another potential problem you might have is you might have done a typo on your variable name. In which case you will see something like this, a fatal error. You can set variables that haven't been created yet, because the act of setting a value on a variable creates it. You, however, cannot use a variable, like say in an if statement, if it hasn't been created yet. Remember I told you things are case sensitive. I set can shoot with a capital S. I tried to use can shoot with a lowercase s. That's a different variable and one that has not been initialized. Now, these error messages, honestly, are horribly user unfriendly. To give a little bit of a breakdown on how to read this. Fatal error, obviously, we just crashed, of keyboard event for space key for object dragon. That tells us the what and where. This is in the object dragon. We are in a keyboard event for space. So that tells me which event I need to go looking in for this error. Down here is where it starts getting a little bit hairier. Execution error variable get. Generally speaking, if you see this, execution error variable get, that means GameMaker did not recognize the variable name that you are trying to use. In this case, can shoot. Ignore the rest of these negative ones and 100,002 numbers. Those aren't really relevant. What's relevant is that it's saying variable get can shoot. It's not recognizing this variable name. So I'm going to abort. Object dragon, space. Oh, hey, here's a can shoot. And I'll fix that. Okay, so hopefully everything is functional. And since I just deliberately broke my code, I'm just going to verify real quick that I fixed what I broke. All right. So now let's talk about alarms. What is this set alarm 0 to 10 thing doing? Alarms are a way of doing delayed actions. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, alarm 0 in 10 steps is going to fire off an event. Now, setting this alarm by itself is not going to do anything. Instead, what I need to do is I need to actually hook into that event. So I'm going to do add event, alarm, alarm 0. Now, inside of this alarm, I can do something, which in this case is going to be setting a variable, can shoot, with a capital S, to 1, meaning I can shoot again. And if you have done this correctly, that's all we actually needed to do in order to have our fireballs working properly. So if I press and hold the space key, I get this nice steady cadence of 3 fireballs per second. So I don't have to kill my spacebar, and it's not the overpowered flamethrower of doom. Now, what are some possible bugs you might be seeing at this point? Well, the most probable bug that you're seeing is that you're still only getting 1 fireball and then nothing happens. A couple of things to check for. In your alarm 0, make sure that you haven't typoed can shoot. Remember, you'll only get the crash errors when you try to use variables that don't exist, not when you set variables that don't exist, because it assumes that you want to create the variable at that point. So if I made a mistake and said can shoot, or maybe better yet, I accidentally left off an O, can shot, that's not going to work, because my if check is looking for can shoot. So 1 fireball and dead. Can't do anything else. So that's one spot to look for mistakes. I want to can shoot there. Another spot to look for mistakes, make sure that your event is alarm 0 and that you set alarm 0. Another mistake, potentially, is you didn't put in your blocks. If you don't put in the blocks, I'm just going to go ahead and delete those real quick. What will happen is this will be associated with this question, so we will correctly fire a single fireball. but as long as I'm holding down the space key, I will always execute these 2 lines of code. The problem is that every time you set an alarm, it resets it. So as long as I hold down the space key, that alarm will never be able to go. To demonstrate, and I do, pardon the coughing, I'm still trying to get over a small cold. Press down the space key. As long as I hold down the space key, I am not going to shoot again. If I release the space key and push it down, I'll get a fireball. As long as I release the space key for at least 1/3 of a second, I can get fireballs. Again, as long as I'm holding down that space key, I'm going to be resetting my alarm. So that's also a potential. Make sure that you have this start of block and end block on your logic. Now, I think you're kind of beginning to see why the book doesn't try to do this right off the bat. This is way more complicated than what the book has. But in the end, I think it makes for a much, much better fireball. And that pretty much concludes getting the fireballs working. This sequence has been going on for quite some time, so in the next video on this, we're going to power through getting in our hatchlings, demons, fireballs interacting with things, and score and background and all of that, because there's really not too much new stuff from here on out, and certainly nothing tricky. The only tricky thing is going to be dealing with high scores and displaying our score. That part's going to be a little tricky because things have drastically changed since GameMaker 6. They really wish they'd put out a new book. So, with that, until the next video.